Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Annabelle, Talent Coordinator at BioBuzz. We're very excited to have everyone here for today's session as part of our Career Catalyst and CUNY office hours that we do every Tuesday. And today we have Bre Cameron that will be presenting. So Bre is a Navy veteran and veteran program manager. She started her career in talent acquisition in 2011, working as a recruiter for various industries and clients. And then Bre joined the biotech industry in 2017 and has spent her time since then building and managing recruiting programs for veterans, merging her recruiting and project management skills with her own experiences, separate from her military to coach guide and advocate for other veterans and military spouses trying to break into the biotech industry. So very thankful to have her on here today. Before I turn it over to her, I do want to give a quick mention to our sponsor, Biotech. So thank you to Biotech for supporting this program. Biotech is a great resource for upskilling in the life science in Maryland. They've trained over 17,000 scientists with their different cutting edge biotech workshops. So definitely encourage you to go to biotech.com to learn more. And also want to mention that today's event is part of our BioBuzz Talent Lab, which is your one-stop shop for career growth, job opportunities, and industry connections. So definitely, check out the Talent Lab. You'll be able to find more opportunities and programs like this session today. So want to hand it over to Bre to get us started.
Thank you, Annabelle. I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can all see my presentation. Oh, 1 second. Give me an error. There we go. Let's try this again. Now it's saying, it's giving me an error now, Annabelle. It worked just a few minutes ago. So let me try something else.
Yeah. Try maybe do it like is asking for a different presentation view.
It's just saying I did exactly what I did last time, but it's saying can't share screen this time.
Okay. Let's see.
Here we go.
Oh, perfect.
All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Bre Cameron. I'm a veteran program manager at Amgen. And today I'm going to tell you or give you an insider guide to biotech for veterans. So here's our agenda. So after I share a little bit about my background and experience, I'll tell you why I think biotech is such a wonderful industry for veterans. And then I'll share some resources, tips, and tricks that I've learned over the years. And I see so many familiar names on here. And so some of you may have heard some of this before. So I'm excited for the questions at the end too, in case there's anything that I may have missed, anything that you're still wondering about. So again, my name is Bre Cameron. I'm the veteran program manager at Amgen. I'm also a Navy veteran. I spent 5 years as a naval photographer. I was just talking to Annabelle about how I did my A school in Fort Meade, where she's close to, and so we were kind of talking about that area. And then I was in San Diego for the other 4 years of my naval career, and then for a few years after that. The next slide, I'm going to show you a little bit about my career journey. We'll go more in depth into that, but it took me a while to get into the biotech industry. But since then, this is where I've stayed, and I've been in the biotech industry for 8 years now. And in that time, I've also that's also when I started doing veteran employment, and I've been leading veteran employment programs since then too. So how many of you are currently transitioning or have been out in like the last 2 years? Just like quick, like raise of hands. All right. So a lot of you may be experiencing a lot of what I went through for those first few years after the military. And so a lot of this that I'm going to share with you can be applied to really any industry, but there's a reason why I think biotech is the best. Do we have any military spouses on the call? Because anything that I'm sharing with you, okay, hi Danny, I know that we've talked before. So anything that I'm sharing today when I'm saying veterans, really it applies to military spouses as well. So my program is called the Veteran Program, but that includes our military spouses, our transitioning service members, all of the above. So anyway, like I said, spent 5 years in the Navy, and I don't know about you all, but one of the reasons I got out, and what I was being told before I got out, was that I was going to be like a hot commodity, like people were going to be tripping over themselves to try to hire me, and that I had way better chances at making more money, and I was way more marketable on the outside, even as a photographer, which you think would be easy. That transfers pretty well to other photographer roles. But after I got out, I was using my MGI Bill to finish my bachelor's degree, which I had been working on while I was in. And so I was working part-time jobs, sometimes more than one at a time. And I'll never forget, I walked into a coffee shop in San Diego that my friends and I frequented quite a bit. And I asked for an application, and I was talking to the manager. And when I handed in my resume along with the application, he said, "Why do you want to work here?" And I said, "Well, because I'm, going to college and I'm looking for a part-time job." And he said, "But you don't have any skills you don't have any barista skills. You've never worked in the service industry." And I was like, "Yeah, but, I think I could pick it up quickly." And he said, "Well, I don't have to have time to train anyone." So he goes, "If you want to work here a couple hours a week and you can wipe down tables and sweep the floors, and then when my baristas have time, they can teach you." He's like, "Otherwise, I can't give you a job." And I was like so floored by that, because in my head, I'm like, you just got to show me one time and I could do it. So it was, and that was just the beginning of what I heard for pretty much the next 5 years. I had a really tough time, a really tough transition, those 5 years in the Navy, where I had so much responsibility and I was learning something new every day. I was doing something new. And even though I was a photographer, I was actually working in supply. So I had all these skills. I didn't know how to translate. I had a 5-page resume. I didn't know how to translate. I didn't know how to interview. I didn't know how to do any of these things. And so for 5 years, I was working part-time jobs. Some of that time I was in school. Then even after I got my degree, I thought, okay, now I have a bachelor's, it'll be a lot easier. But that 5 years was just a black hole in my history, and it didn't seem to count for towards anything that I was applying to. So eventually I took a part-time job in talent acquisition and started at the complete bottom. I only worked 8 hours a week. I was calling, doing 5-minute phone screens. And that eventually I was doing pretty well at that. And that led to me doing some administrative work, which then eventually led to me becoming a full-time recruiter in 2013. Actually, I started off as a part-time while I was in grad school, and then moved up to full-time in 2013. And then in 2017, but even then I was having a hard time getting promoted because I didn't have all this prior experience as a full-time recruiter. So eventually I was approached by Amgen to run a veteran hiring program for them. And I said, no. I said, nope, I'm working towards a promotion. I don't want to mess it up. I bounced around a lot. And they just kept asking and kept asking. And eventually I said yes. And it was like nothing I'd ever done before. So I wasn't sure how long I was going to last in this industry or in veteran recruiting, but here I am 8 years later, and I can't imagine that I ever said no to this industry, to this position. But I've learned so much that I now get to share with my fellow veterans about, how to make themselves more marketable, industries that they should be targeting, things like that. So now I feel like that 5 years I always thought of as like the black hole of my work experience now counts for something, which is really exciting. So here on the left are some previous industries that I worked in. Of course, I was a freelance photographer for a long time. I worked in retail, graphic design, like you name it. It was just kind of any part-time job I could find, I would take. And that's even how I ended up in recruiting. And then while I was in recruiting, I worked in some other various industries as well, hiring in these different fields: automotive, health insurance, food and beverage. But once I got to biotech, I remember I always had this sadness after the Navy that I felt like I'll never get that feeling back that I had when I was in the military. And I always kind of just assumed it was the camaraderie that I missed. But once about 6 months into working for Amgen and working in the biotech industry, I realized how happy I was and how satisfied I felt with my career for the first time in a very long time. And I realized it was that sense of purpose. And it was, I was able to help others in a way, especially being a veteran recruiter. But not just that, but my whole company is serving others, serving patients is Amgen's mission. And that's a similar mission across the industry as well. And everyone here is very passionate and caring. And I've worked for 2 biotech companies now, and that just seems to be the culture. Is everyone is so focused on the patients and providing help and resources to them. And it's a very similar feeling that I had when I was in the military of being a part of something bigger than myself, making an impact. Not only that, but the biotech industry is known for their great benefits. Great 401k plan, great paid time off, even medical, dental, and vision is better than I've seen in other industries as well. It's also a growing industry. It's an industry that we'll probably always have a need for, unfortunately. I mean, both companies that I've worked for have helped, with products for patients that are suffering from cancer. And there's all kinds of other diseases and ailments that Amgen works with as well. But also on top of that, because it's always changing, it's very innovative, creative, and collaborative, which I love. And I also experienced that in the military as well. So you guys probably did too, even if you weren't a photographer, but just there were times you had to get creative just to get the job done. So resources that I have come across since being in veteran recruiting are, BioBuzz, of course. I met BioBuzz when I was with my last biotech company, and they're a great advocate and resource for not just veterans, but just for the industry in general. Candorful is a wonderful, some of you I may have already told this to, but Candorful is a wonderful, wonderful resource. They do 3 mock interviews for veterans and military spouses. And like I mentioned, I did not know how to interview when I first got out. I spoke from the heart. I never prepared. There was a lot of times where they'd ask me a question and I'd say, I'm not sure, and Candorful, I feel like it took me years of failing at interviews, never getting a call back, to learn these things on my own. Candorful will teach it to you in a matter of weeks. I'm a volunteer for them. There's a lot of veterans on there that are, but you can also find different people that work in different industries and in different positions. And so you get to select who you want to do your mock interviews with. Some of these others, MedTech Vets, another great resource for trying to break into the industry. VetLine is a kind of like a military skills translator that will help. But what it does is you plug in your information and it aligns you with different positions that are available. Amgen is we are one of their clients, and there's a lot of other companies too, but it will take your experience, translate it, and then match it with job openings that are available. So another great resource to have. But all of these that are here on the left-hand side are great resources for if you're trying to break in not only into biotech, but any industry as well. And then SkillBridge. Is anyone still on active duty? So awesome. Thank you, Dr. Paul. So if you're still in active duty, you've probably heard of the DoD SkillBridge program. I highly recommend, if you're able to, participating in a SkillBridge. They did not have that option when I was transitioning out of the military, and I see the impact that it makes for allowing people to ease into the civilian workforce. So like I said, I thought I was going to get out and it was going to be really easy for me to find a job, and only to find out that it was not easy. And those some transitioning service members, some of you maybe have, if you didn't get to do a skill bridge, have probably experienced, you know, similarly as I did, where it is kind of rough. So if you're able to do a skill bridge program, highly recommend Hiring Our Heroes. If you're in North Carolina, NC Biotech has a program for veterans called MOVE, the Military Outreach and Veterans Engagement, where you receive some training at a local community college in biotech, and then they align you with apprenticeships. And so Hiring Our Heroes also, if you're already transitioned, if you're still looking for work, you can do, they have a program for veterans, Career Forward, I think it's called Career Forward. And you complete a Google certification, and then you can do an apprenticeship through Hiring Our Heroes as well. So definitely things to look into. You can target different biotech or pharmaceutical companies. And then, like I said, there's other companies in other industries as well that you can look into. So tips for breaking into biotech. So here, if you guys want to screenshot this, networking is going to be the key. Honestly, I didn't write anything else down because in my opinion, networking is probably going to be one of the only things that works. So even if you use like MedTech Vets or say 4Block and stuff like that, that is still networking. So if you can use different organizations like that to build your network, but all of those industries that I showed you, my career journey, all of the positions except 2 that I've had in my career were I found through somebody I know. They referred me to that job. And that's why I worked in so many different industries. It was, you know, someone's brother owns a business and they need somebody. And so I would do that. And even though I didn't have any background in it, I would do that. And it's just kind of, that's how I got into recruiting. My brother worked for a recruiting company. He said they were looking for part-time people. I took that job, eventually led to where I'm at now. The 2 positions that I got without any experience and without knowing anyone at those companies, the reason I got a call was because I was a veteran, and that's because the hiring manager was a veteran. So they understood my background. And where other hiring managers were probably looking at USS Ronald Reagan, what does that mean? You know, what was the other one? Fleet Imaging Command Pacific. We've never heard of it. So they would just pass on my resume. That was one of the mistakes I made was, you know, putting each command, which no, if you're not in the military, nobody's going to understand that. But using your network and utilizing the veterans at those companies. So here I have instructions on how to find other veterans at different companies. So say you want to work for Thermo Fisher Scientific. You know, this is a bunch of different top biotech companies that I have listed here. But if you want to target just specific ones that are maybe in your area, you can do that. And then you'll see selecting current company and then past company, putting all the branches down as well. And that should pull up for you if you're looking for, say, a program management job or a supply chain manager role. You can put that in the general search and then try to narrow it down by people who are veterans at those current companies. Reach out to them, let them know that you are interested in breaking into the industry. I guarantee you that the veterans will help you out before anyone else does. We've all been through this struggle. And so we definitely want to help others who have been through it as well. But my veteran network here at Amgen is remarkable. They are always up for helping other veterans and advocating for them within the company. But I really feel strongly that most likely networking is going to be what gets you any job, and especially into the biotech industry. And then this last bullet point here, I wrote, you don't need a background in biotech to break into the industry. I did not have a background. I didn't even know what biotech was when Amgen approached me. They approached me because I was a recruiter and I was a veteran, and not because I had I had any industry experience. But although one of the things that can be tough about breaking into the industry is that a lot of roles, the hiring manager is looking for someone with previous experience. This is where your network comes in. I think once people experience you face to face and can hear about your experience in person, that's what's going to help them realize that you will pick up the industry part quickly. I had a really good friend who used to always say, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And so on this next page, I'm going to give you some tips on how to network successfully. And so that last line, it's about who knows you. It's all about who thinks of you, who remembers you, who did you make an impact on, that when they do have an opportunity, they will think of you. So I think it's important to approach these networking calls and meetings with a plan. And so very often in this industry, and I completely understand because I did the same thing, I'll have veterans approach me and say, here's my resume, what would I be good at? And so a lot of and I know that it's hard to know what's out there. And so I think if you can do some research, whether it's research on the company, research on different positions, but kind of have some idea. A lot of candidates that I talk to, they say, for instance, if they did logistics in the military, they aren't necessarily looking at logistics positions outside of that. Really, they're just like, just tell me what I'd be good at, or they're up for anything. And that's great. And that will definitely help you later on once you do get a position. But I think in the beginning, having a plan of, okay, so I was really good at engineering, I was really good at logistics while I was in, so I'm going to focus on trying to find jobs in those fields. Like having some sort of plan, narrowing down the options, and then approaching people, about those options. Doing your research, like I mentioned, researching the company, looking up their values, looking up their mission, seeing if it's something that aligns with you, using those when you're, in the interview, and I'll get to that later too. But just researching them on social media to see what they're doing in communities and things like that. But doing your research after every networking call, asking for a reference. Ask them, is there anyone else you suggest I talk to at the company? See if they can make an introduction. Keep that web growing, your big networking web. And then make a reminder to individuals that you think can help you the most. You don't have to follow up with everyone, but just make a reminder, maybe like once a month, following up with them just to check in. I talk to a lot of people. I probably last year, I think I collected 700 candidates in a year. So that's a lot of people. And so, trying to build an actual relationship with someone, and so that they think of you, so that they remember you when opportunities come up, maybe a few months from now. Check LinkedIn daily. I would try to post, share things almost daily, so that you come up, you're again in front of people, trying to build your network there, but staying busy on there. Also, a lot of the companies that I worked for and industries I've worked with, a lot of the recruiters use LinkedIn to find candidates. That's usually where I check first. And a lot of the recruiters I work with now do the same. So, checking your messages regularly, answering messages from recruiters. On the other hand, reaching out to recruiters. The reason I recommend reaching out to veterans is because recruiters receive hundreds of messages. If you have messaged me on LinkedIn, you probably have not responded to me, because I have hundreds of messages that I have not had a chance to get through. So I always tell people to email me. So I would refrain from reaching out to recruiters unless they reach out to you first, and focus more on veterans that work for the company instead. You will get a lot further. And then staying up to date, follow some industry news, trends, different companies that you're interested in. That way, if you do get into an interview, you can talk about what you know. It may also help you with, if you see, for instance, Amgen is expanding. They just announced that they're going to expand our site in North Carolina. So that in the next few months that there will be openings, for that site, because if they're expanding, they need to, fill that expansion with workers. So just kind of keeping up to date on the trends as well. oops, sorry. So marketing yourself. And actually, I feel like, did I skip a slide? Nope. Okay. So marketing yourself. Okay. So resume tips and interview tricks. For those of you, some of you have talked to already, so you may have gotten this advice about your resume. But I mentioned earlier that I had a 5-page resume. And it was for each year that I was in the military, it seemed. I took all of my evals and I copy and pasted onto my resume. And one thing I can tell you is that recruit two pages. A lot of recruiters aren't going to go past the first page. So try to have all of your relevant experience on that first page. But consolidate your military experience under the branch. If I had probably put U.S. Navy instead of USS Ronald Reagan, Fleet Imaging Command Pacific, Personnel Support Detachment, if I had done that, everyone knows what the U.S. Navy is. So I may not have gotten disregarded as quickly as I did. So consolidate under the branch, only list the information that is relevant to that position. So I was a photographer in the military, but I'm applying for a supply chain position. I'm not going to talk about, how I led the studio or how I processed film or any of that. I'm going to talk about when I led the supply chain office for my department. I'm going to talk about that experience instead. So I can take out all the stuff that had to do with actual like photo shoots and things like that. They're not going to care. So maybe I eventually had like a master resume, which was the 5 pages, and then I would just copy and paste what was relevant to the position that I was applying for. So targeting your resume to the job description. I have found that AI is really helpful when converting military lingo into civilian terms. So I use it sometimes. I was Navy, so maybe there's like a Army resume that comes that gets sent to me, and I'm trying to understand what this certain thing means, or how I can translate it to the recruiters into terms that they would understand. And I'll use AI and I'll say, how is this position in the Army relevant to this position in the biotech industry? And AI will come up with something like points, and then I can use those points to create a little, a few sentences about that candidate and how their skills translate. So I highly recommend using AI when you're trying to translate your own experience. A big thing is in recruiters and hiring managers are not only going to want to see what you've done, but how well you've done it. So using quantitative data, showing that I increased production by this percentage, I saved my command or my company this much money. So showing numbers, data, that's what they want to see, that you can do your job well. It was hard for me to talk about my wins. It was hard for me to also talk about myself when I first started in the, applying for jobs. But I didn't like bragging about myself or tooting my own horn. I think that's kind of how we're conditioned in the military. But when you get out there in the civilian workforce, especially when you're applying for jobs, you'll need to do that. And you'll also need to talk about your contributions, not just your team, but what you did as a part of that team to get results. And then I also, not everybody does this, but some people do, just something to keep in mind. Sometimes I'll have candidates who will apply to like 100 roles. And they're all over the place, all different levels. They'll be anywhere from like an entry level to a VP level, and they'll be anywhere from admin to supply chain to sales rep to, just all over the place. You at Amgen anyway, you can apply to as many jobs as you want. There's not a limit. But when recruiters see that you're applying all over the place and at all different levels, it tells them that they don't know what you want to do. They don't know what you're good at, or that you don't know what you're good at, or, that you, that can turn recruiters away. So what I would suggest is applying only to roles that you're qualified for. This was a mistake I made. I would read a job description and I would think, ooh, that sounds fun, I'm going to apply. I never really paid attention to what the qualifications were or if I met them, because in my head I was like, they're going to see I'm a veteran and they're going to call me. They're going to see I'm a veteran with a bachelor's degree and they're going to call me. Well, none of that happened. So at Amgen and a lot of companies, you'll see basic qualifications and preferred qualifications. The basic qualifications are usually, there's no leeway on that. That is the bare minimum that they have to accept. So if you say they want 4 years of project management experience and a bachelor's degree, but you either A, haven't completed your bachelor's degree yet, or you have 3 years of experience, not 4, then you shouldn't apply to it. You can, but you won't hear from them. So I wouldn't waste your time with that. I would stick to the roles where you at least meet the basic qualifications. And then on top of that, the preferred qualifications, you can meet the basic qualifications in 0 preferred qualifications, but again, you probably are not going to hear from anyone. The preferred qualifications are the hiring manager's wish list. So the recruiter is looking for candidates who can check almost all of those boxes under preferred qualifications. That's why it's important to target your resume for those preferred qualifications. But if you can't meet, say, 75% of those preferred qualifications, or show a way that your skills translate to that, again, you're probably not, you can still apply, but you may not hear anything back from them, because if there are 100 candidates applying to the role and there are 25 that meet those requirements and you don't meet any, they're probably going to move forward with some from the group of 25. So just something to keep in mind. Interview tricks. I was a terrible interviewer, like I mentioned before. And it wasn't until I was on the other end and I was interviewing people that I realized, oh my God, like how terrible my interview skills were. And no wonder I never got a call back, because when you're the interviewer and people can't answer questions, or they go on tangents, or they give you 5 examples instead of 1, it can be really irritating. But another thing that I would do is, like I said, I wouldn't prepare. And I would always thought I wanted to be authentic and answer from the heart. But what would happen was either A, I couldn't answer the question, or B, I would give a really terrible example. And then after the interview, I would think, oh my God, why did I give that example? I should have talked about this instead. So what I've learned being in recruiting as long as I have, and what I started doing, was I would print off the job description, and under all the bullet points under job responsibilities and preferred qualifications, you can basically just put a question mark on those and expect that you're going to get a question about that. So I just started making little notes, not writing out a whole answer, but just making notes about the example I wanted to give. So that way it's fresh in my head. I've written it down, which helps me remember. And if I'm on a phone interview or a virtual interview, I can keep it next to me and reference it if needed. But that really helped a lot. And I was much more prepared for interviews when I started doing that. Again, like I mentioned before, studying the company's values and including them in your answers. So one of Amgen's values is compete intensely and win. So if you get asked a question, if you can work in about how you like to compete, or you like to win, or something like that, like using some of those values, because a big thing that a company like Amgen and most biotech and a lot of companies in other industries, they're looking for cultural fits. So if you can include some of those values and the mission into your answers, that not only makes you a good fit technically, but also culturally as well. Asking thoughtful questions. So this is where the research comes in, like researching the company, but asking questions about whether it's the process they use, the culture themselves, asking the manager, how did you get into this industry? Why are you in this industry? Just have a list of questions that you can pull from during your interview. And then I suggest always sending a thank you email. Even if you can't reach the hiring manager directly, send it to the recruiter to pass along. It really makes a difference. I've only had a few hiring managers tell me, well, we never got a thank you note from them, so we thought maybe they weren't interested. That's happened a couple of times, but most people are not expecting it. So when they get one, it bumps you up a little bit unofficially. They really like that. And in that thank you note, talk about why, show your passion, like show that you really want to work for that company. They love seeing that when someone's passionate, when someone has a why to why, why they want to work at a company. And then reference things, topics that you discussed during the interview as well. And just being thoughtful again and showing your interest and excitement about working for the company. So lastly, my closing remarks. There's so much more I could share with you. Be sure to check, add me on LinkedIn. I have an article series that you can find under my featured posts that goes even more further in depth into a lot of what I shared with you today. But I do like to, when I get a chance, share different articles and things that I come across. I also share openings for Amgen when I can. But a lot of the candidates I work with, I think biotech is a tough industry to get into. It's very competitive. So one, if you're really passionate about getting into this industry, don't give up, but also realizing it's a marathon, not a race. So it could take months, years, even sometimes to break into the industry, but continuing to build your network, continuing to keep up to date with what's going on in the industry and all of that. But definitely hang in there. There's a lot of recruiters out there like me who are happy to help. I'm happy to help you as well. But without much further ado, here's if you want to scan that to add me on LinkedIn. But now we can move to Q&A.